Okay, so we were a little bit delayed, so I hope that doesn't make time short for the presenters because that can be a little frustrating. So hang on a second. So my name is Arlene Haché, and I'm the co-chair of the Women's National Housing and Homelessness Network, and I am your very short-term moderator because I'm going to leave these women to completely moderate their own panel because I have a different kind of task that I have to get done. Anyway, so I'm going to open the panel by making sure I do a land acknowledgement. To recognize that we're gathered in Ottawa on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence and stewardship of these lands continue to this day. And I'm always a bit nervous about land acknowledgements because kind of your relationship with community members is far deeper than just a land acknowledgement. So I get nervous about it, but anyway, there it is. So I'm honored today to introduce three speakers, building a roadmap to 2S LGBTQIA inclusion with Rebecca Hooton from the 519. Martha. Yeah. Thank you. And did I pronounce it right? You did. Good. So I'm super interested in hearing about that. The Women's Homelessness Sharing Practices and Needs with Marianne Daigle, le research d'aide aux personnes seules et itinérantes de Montréal. Merci. I'm married to a French guy, and I asked him to teach me French, and then I hurt his feelings, and he refused to teach me after that, so I still don't know French, but I'm still married to him 50 years later. And the third presenter is Traditional Housing for Women with Substance Use Disorders Experiencing Homelessness with Sui Mi Cheng, Street Haven at the Crossroads. So did I pronounce all of that correctly? Yeah. Right. Okay, you correct me because names are important. Sumi. Sumi. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so I'll leave the panel to carry out it on their own, beginning with Rebecca. Great. And then we'll go forward from there. Thank you very much.
I think our presentation is here somewhere. Who knows? I'm sorry. Bear with us for a moment. Wednesday. What day is it today? Thursday. It's here. There we go. Ah. Woo! Yay! All right, welcome, folks. Thank you for being here. If you don't have a handout, please come grab one, but I think we got everyone. This is us at a different conference. We won't spend too much time on the introductions because we want to get into the meat of our session today. So some context. Give some context.
So we at the 519 are a 2S LGBTQ community centre in the downtown east side of Toronto. So we serve our geographic area, and we also serve 2S LGBTQ folks across Toronto and actually practically all across Southern Ontario at this point as well. We, over the last couple of years, have been working on a collaboration with Homes First, which is one of the city's biggest shelter providers, on the operation of the city's first shelter space for 2S LGBTQ plus adults. And our space, Pacewood, is the name of the space, was named by the first cohort of residents, is specifically for LGBTQ plus newcomer refugees. This collaboration was born out of lots of grassroots community activism and many consultations with community around how practically and why queer and trans folks are excluded from traditional shelter services. So over many, many years, including a City Commission report in 2002, and then another City Commission report in 2022, both either supported by or delivered by the 519, we found very, very similar barriers that people were experiencing. So that grew into now this small 20-bed shelter for LGBTQ refugee newcomers. And we wanted to make sure that we were continually trying to improve and continuing to identify issues within the model that we were building with residents. So we, in 2023, commissioned a external consultant to do a community consultation with residents of the space, former residents of the space, and people who were accessing other shelter spaces, mainstream shelter spaces in Toronto at that time. And there's a few things coming out of that consultation, including a toolkit, which is soon to be published. And the idea, the intention of this toolkit is it's providing guidance and a model for folks who are trying to make their spaces more accessible to 2S LGBTQ folks, and also for community subject matter experts, irrespective of what specific community they serve, to think about how they might collaborate with shelter providers in providing demographic-specific shelter spaces.
So we've pulled out some things from the toolkit. As Martha mentioned, it's not fully it's not ready to be printed or circulated, but we thought, we're here, we want to make sure that you folks have what you need to act. Often inclusion around 2S LGBTQ individuals and issues and needs is something that is named but not necessarily acted on because people don't have the pathway. And so we wanted today to spend less time telling you, what you could do, and have you talk to each other about what you specifically in your context will do. At the back of, on the last page of your handout there, you've got a little work plan. So we're going to give you sort of a bit of an overview, and then we're going to ask you to turn to each other and form sort of little, pockets of conversation, and just think about one piece that you might act on when you get home. This doesn't have to become your entire work plan for the next 6 months, but it might.
We'd love it if it did, though.
We'd love it if it did, though. You could. This could change everything. But there's different sort of layers here. So you can, some things you can change immediately. Some things take a little bit more action. Who are you going to bring onto your team? And other things are, of course, systemic, and that's all of our responsibility. And there are actions you can take towards that as well. But I think often we look at this as a systemic issue, and when you don't have a whole lot of information at your disposal of what the steps are, it can get really overwhelming, especially with, I'm sure, the many things that you have on your plates. And so we wanted to offer you some ideas that you could take away that do come from the toolkit, and how to start working on them. So we'll start with intake, and we're only going to pull a couple of these out because you do actually have a deeper explanation in front of you.
I can just roll through these.
Yeah.
I'm going to roll through these relatively quickly because you do have them in more detail in your handout, and they're just kind of to give you a little bit of a flavour of the groupings within the toolkit, and a couple of specific suggestions that residents made, or things they identified that were already useful within our context that helped the comfort and ownership of the space. So first off, there was a lot of discussion around intake and how to make that a less stressful process, and therefore have the transition into the space be more comfortable, and the longer term trust and comfort in the space be supported. So we talked about things like, it's all in there. So definitely things about like asking questions of people without making assumptions, sharing pronouns to make it clear that that's normal and acceptable, and welcome people in. Something that we do in our space is we have the person who does the intake from the 519 continues to follow that individual, walk alongside them through their stay in the shelter, and then also into their transition to housing, which creates a lot of housing stability and is working very well in the few years that we've been doing that. Next up, we have staffing, super important. quite a long-term issue in most contexts. Staffing is incredibly important. It comes out in every single community consultation and conversation that we have about inclusion and acceptance into services, that representation matters. So if you are a worker that's creating space for your queer and trans co-workers to feel like they can be themselves at work, supporting them, interjecting, not tokenizing them, being an active ally in their liberation in the workspace. And if you are a decision maker and a hirer, it's hiring people, asking questions of people to determine how aware they are, how competent and how committed to diversity, equity and inclusion they are. Resident safety and comfort, of course, something we talked about a lot. And a lot of these things will be helpful and supportive of everybody, irrespective of their gender identity, expression, sexual orientation. So something that we do at Pacewood is we got the shelter provider to install privacy screens in the dormitory spaces. Simple. Hadn't been done before, really helps. And it allows people to have some more space that they can personalize. People decorate the screen, so it creates a sense of ownership in the space. And there are some other suggestions in your book there. Being awareness of community resources is really important. So making sure you're aware of services and supports that are around locally to you, and just giving them to people without people having to expose themselves by asking for specific resources. And then thinking about what a transition to housing would look like. So supporting people in screening roommates so they don't end up with homophobic roommates. Thinking about how you make good connections with landlords, accompanying people to viewing so they feel more comfortable in being themselves in spaces that are unfamiliar. And always good, building partnerships. And we find that formalizing partnerships is really, really useful. So having MOUs and agreements with other organizations so that can be a continued, understood relationship, even during staff transition and turnover. You're not losing that contact and that like system of referral and stuff like that. So now we're going to turn to your worksheets. So please take some time, turn to the people around you. You can take this back with you and do all you want with it. But for this short time, these 10 minutes, what we'd love for you to do is just turn to the folks near you and have a few conversations about a first step that you can make. The last page, as Rebecca said, of your little pack there has a worksheet to help you determine who you need to talk to about the change you want to see and you want to make, and give you some suggestions and thoughts about, will help you think about how you would do that.
I also just want to name that the rest of the pieces in there, the first page, double-sided, is everything we've just said, so don't worry if you didn't take notes. But in there you can find some ideas of what that intervention might be. And the following one is a scenario split into two pieces with the sort of response points that you want to make sure your team hits. So one thing that you might consider is taking this scenario to your staff at your next team meeting and say, hey, let's talk about this. How would you respond to this scenario? And then you will have the talking points and make sure that they know how to respond to these pieces. And we hope that we've sort of given you a fairly comprehensive overview of how to do that, so that if you didn't know how to respond yourself, now you do. And so you can photocopy that first page, give them the top half, and then the second half will actually be, you'll see how it's laid out. The second half of that page is like a, think about this now that you've had your preliminary thoughts. And then on the opposite page of the worksheet is just some bathroom signs that you might consider. Again, this is a simple intervention. You're not going to necessarily be changing the building that you're in. It's hard to knock down walls, takes a lot of capital, but you probably can work to change some of your bathroom signage. That could be another step that you take. So those are two visual examples, and then of course there's many more in the list. I think what we'll get you to do, is just maybe along rows or something like that. If you can just mention, take a second, look through what you've got. You've got maybe 6 minutes to discuss. So I encourage you not to take, as much as I want you to be networking, not to take the time to introduce yourselves and what you do, but just jump into what you might do in this regard next. And then maybe you'll find an ally in the room, a co-conspirator to continue that work beyond here. So I'll touch base in about 4 minutes to let you know you've got 2 minutes left. And if you have any questions, you know where to find us. Thanks, everyone. I know that was incredibly short. I'm just going to bring your attention back to the front so we can close up for today. There's obviously a million things to talk about in this regard, so we really appreciate the lively conversations witnessing from up here. We were able to have one as well, so I think that's amazing. We just wanted to give space if anybody has something that really jumped out for you that you talked about that you want to share, a goal that you're going to take to your team, or any, well, not questions, because we'll talk about questions at the end, but is there anything that you're like, I'm going to do this, or you can ponder as well. And there's a microphone just over there. It's mostly for translation purposes. Thank you.
Not necessarily something to implement, but eventually, yes. But we did talk about the idea that sometimes as service providers, our fears, we kind of put those in front of our actions. I know, the population that we currently serve, and I sometimes I predict the feedback that we might get from them if we put somebody in their community that is a trans woman who might present more as a man, and my fear for them, but also for all the backlash, sometimes that prevents me from making those moves. And so trying to put that behind me and work with what comes instead of the anxiety for what hasn't happened yet.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I love that. Moving forward with the culture of inclusion at the forefront and saying, we can have complicated conversations. I feel confident that everyone in this room is good at nuanced, complicated conversations. And if maybe you're not, then someone who you work with is, right? You have team members who have these every day, who know how to navigate complex trauma, intersecting identities that sometimes conflict with one another, and personalities that conflict with one another. And so this is just one layer that you can add in. And if you and your staff team feel empowered to act, and you know what transphobia sounds like, looks like, and how to act when you hear it, then everybody is able to move forward in exactly this idea of, we can do this, and people deserve to be here. They deserve safe housing. They deserve full, healthy, wonderful lives. And how can I be a person in the storm that helps them move through? So thank you for your conversations. We'll be here all day, but we'll be here later if you have any questions. But I would like to pass it right along to Marianne. Thank you so much. Where's the mouse? There it is. Est-ce que tu as une présentation? Oui, c'est ça, celle-là. Parfait. Merci.
Je suis plus petite. Bonjour, ma présentation va être en français et comme vous pouvez l'entendre, je n'ai plus beaucoup de voix. Donc, vous me le direz si ça part durant la présentation. Je vais sortir mes notes. Donc, bonjour, je m'appelle Marianne Daigle, j'utilise les pronoms elle, she. Je suis organisatrice communautaire au RAPSIM, le réseau d'aide aux personnes seules et itinérantes de Montréal. Je vais revenir un peu là, sur la présentation de mon organisme. Je suis super heureuse d'être ici aujourd'hui. C'est la deuxième fois que je présente ce projet-là. Et puis, en fait, c'est un projet qui s'est déroulé sur 2 ans. Il est encore en construction, en co-construction. Et puis, il s'appelle l'itinérance chez les femmes. Excusez. Partage des pratiques et besoins. Donc, je vais vous présenter rapidement notre groupement. Je vais aussi vous présenter un peu le contexte de l'itinérance des femmes à Montréal, à Montréal et au Québec. La place que prend l'analyse différenciée selon les sexes dans une perspective intersectionnelle, ADS+. Faites-vous-en pas, je vais utiliser ADS+, plus souvent après. Dans notre projet, le projet, ses objectifs, ainsi que nos constats et finalement les suites du projet. Donc, comme je l'ai mentionné plus tôt, je suis organisatrice communautaire au réseau d'aide aux personnes seules et itinérantes de Montréal. On est un regroupement en itinérance montréalais à Montréal, Québec. Et nous sommes aussi la plus grande concertation régionale en itinérance au Québec. Cette année, on fête nos 50 ans. Et puis, notre mission est la défense des droits des personnes en situation d'itinérance ou à risque de l'être. Nous avons actuellement une centaine d'organismes membres du RAPSIM qui sont vraiment sur le continuum de services, c'est-à-dire qu'on a autant des organismes qui font de l'hébergement, du centre de jour, réduction des méfaits, etc. Notre action repose sur la politique nationale de lutte à l'itinérance qui identifie 5 axes d'intervention prioritaires. Le logement, on va le descendre encore, le logement, les services de santé et les services sociaux, le revenu, l'éducation, je vais le prendre, c'est plus facile, l'insertion sociale, l'insertion socio-professionnelle, la cohabitation sociale et les enjeux liés à la judiciarisation. Toutefois, il est vraiment important pour nous de souligner en fait que la politique, on a besoin d'aller plus loin, notamment au niveau de ce qui concerne la compréhension de l'itinérance invisible, mais aussi de l'itinérance des femmes. On est une belle équipe de 5 organisateurs et organisatrices communautaires et une direction générale qui est ici dans la salle. Bonjour Ali. Notre action touche les 3 paliers de gouvernement, municipal, provincial, fédéral. Le projet. Donc, notre projet est issu, en fait, d'un mandat qui a été donné lors d'une assemblée générale où on a été mandaté de mieux représenter l'itinérance des femmes, leurs besoins et les réalités spécifiques par une analyse différenciée selon les sexes dans une perspective intersectionnelle. Toutefois, on avait vraiment carte blanche sur le chantier, ce qui était une très bonne chose, mais à la fois, beaucoup de choses pouvaient se passer. Cette partie-là, j'ai pas de diapo parce que cette partie-là était pas prévue dans ma présentation. Mais après avoir fait 2 jours ici, j'ai envie de vous parler un peu du contexte de l'itinérance des femmes au Québec, à Montréal, pour pouvoir un peu là vous mettre un peu là comment ça se passe de notre côté. Donc, à Montréal, selon le plus récent dénombrement, ce sont autour de 47% des personnes en situation d'itinérance qui se trouvent dans notre ville. De ce nombre, on estime que 29% sont des femmes. Nous croyons définitivement, par contre, là, que ce chiffre-là est sous-estimé, notamment à cause de l'itinérance invisible. Pour les femmes, à Montréal, il y a 19 ressources et j'ai appris hier qu'on en a 20 avec la Nissa Home, qui est une ressource dédiée pour les femmes musulmanes. D'ailleurs, je vous invite fortement à aller voir leur site web. C'est vraiment un projet qui est génial. Donc, je suis très fière de dire qu'on a 20 ressources. Elles sont sur le continuum de services, donc autant de l'hébergement d'urgence qu'on a des ressources plus permanentes. Sur ces ressources-là, on fait seulement 3 avec Nissa Home qui acceptent les femmes et leurs enfants. Toutefois, les besoins sont très grands. Le Partenariat pour la prévention et la lutte à l'itinérance des femmes, le PLIF, qui est un regroupement montréalais de 5 ressources inclusives d'hébergement et de logement communautaire pour femmes en situation d'itinérance ou à risque de l'être, rapportait pour l'année 2022-2023 pas moins de 25 119 refus par manque de place. Donc, ça vous donne quand même là, une idée, dans le fond, là, vraiment de l'ampleur là, des besoins. Je vais vous parler rapidement de l'analyse différenciée selon les sexes dans une perspective intersectionnelle ADS+, qu'on a utilisé dans le cadre de notre projet pour deux façons, en fait. L'analyse de nos pratiques internes au RAPSIM, mais aussi son utilisation dans les groupes membres, dans le but, en fait, d'être capable de mieux représenter les réalités des femmes en situation d'itinérance. Donc, pour partir sur des bases communes, l'ADS+, c'est une lunette d'analyse qui reconnaît qu'il y a des biais sexistes dans notre société. Elle demande de se questionner sur l'impact différencié entre les hommes et les femmes qu'aura le projet activité politique, tout en considérant la multitude de facteurs sociaux et identitaires qui s'ajoutent au sexe et au genre. L'objectif est de s'assurer que, en fait, que l'offre répond aux besoins des femmes et encore davantage à celles qui se retrouvent à la croisée d'oppression et sinon de l'adapter ou d'ajouter des volets qui permettront de répondre aux besoins. Je vais me prendre une gorgée d'eau. Quand je suis nerveuse, je parle vite. Fait que là, je sens que je vais vite, fait que je vais essayer de ralentir. Donc, l'ADS+ devrait être considéré à toutes les étapes du projet. Ça, c'est aussi un élément très important. Donc, autant en amont, pendant, après. Et pour faire une ADS+, il faut avoir une certaine méthode. Là. Ça ne part pas de notre cerveau. Dans le contexte de ce projet, on va utiliser le terme « femme » qui inclut toutes les personnes cis et trans qui s'identifient ou qui sont perçues comme femmes. On tenait à le préciser parce que pour nous, en fait, c'était vraiment important que le terme soit inclusif. Et puis, malheureusement, ça a aussi des limites dans l'optique où la définition de parler des femmes en bloc homogène, ça peut avoir tendance à considérer que toutes les femmes ont le même vécu, les mêmes besoins. Donc, évidemment, c'est une limite que notre projet a aussi. Nos objectifs. Donc, on avait 2 objectifs et on est allé avec des objectifs, ma foi, plutôt complexes. Donc, on avait un premier objectif qui était sur tout ce qui touchait la perception. Donc, documenter les perceptions de nos membres sur les enjeux entourant l'itinérance des femmes, la fréquentation de celles-ci, les stratégies utilisées pour les organismes pour mieux répondre à leurs besoins et l'importance accordée à la DS+, dans les ressources en itinérance. Ensuite, on avait tout l'aspect de réfléchir à la DS+. Est-ce que c'est le meilleur concept à mobiliser en itinérance? Est-ce que c'est possible de rendre compte de la complexité avec la DS+, des besoins et des réalités des femmes en situation d'itinérance, surtout celles qui se retrouvent à l'intersection d'autres oppressions, par exemple le capacitisme, le racisme, l'homophobie, la transphobie? Et est-ce que les demandes de bailleurs de fonds en termes d'ADS+, ont les effets escomptés dans les organismes? Est-ce qu'il y a des effets collatéraux? Cette partie-là, je ne l'aborderai pas du tout. J'avais vraiment pas le temps, j'ai 20 minutes, donc ça va très vite. Mais c'est quelque chose qui vous intéresse, on peut en reparler à la période de questions. Donc, notre projet débute en 2021. Je porte ce projet-là avec ma collègue Joanie Veilleux et on est soutenu par un comité aviseur, dans le fond, qui sert à nourrir la démarche, nous orienter, valider les actions. Et dans le fond, ce comité-là est composé de 6 organismes, personnes représentantes d'organismes qui ont tous des forces différentes. On a vraiment décidé de mettre au cœur de notre démarche les groupes qui œuvrent exclusivement avec les femmes, donc en non-mixité. Donc, on a tenu en premier 3 focus group pour débuter le projet et orienter la suite. Puis ensuite, on a tenu 7 focus group avec des membres du RAPSIM qui travaillent en mixité et en non-mixité. Donc, c'est un total de 10 focus group et 33 groupes qui ont été rencontrés. Évidemment, les groupes qui ont participé étaient volontaires et on peut présumer qu'il y avait un intérêt ou une sensibilité à ces questions-là. Donc, encore une fois, une limite à la chose. On peut se douter que les résultats vont être teintés là, par cet intérêt-là. On a aussi pris le temps d'analyser nos discours et pratiques internes au regroupement entre 2020 et 2023, c'est-à-dire les sorties publiques, les publications sur les réseaux sociaux, les activités organisées et autres communications. Finalement, aujourd'hui, on est à rédiger un journal de recherche et à présenter le projet en dehors de nos structures. Le journal de recherche, en fait, se veut une forme un peu plus légère, un peu plus agréable à lire, parce qu'en fait, on a eu plus de réflexions que de réponses parfois. Donc, c'est un mélange de nos réflexions, un mélange d'outils. Ça se veut vraiment en tant que tel un guide que les groupes vont pouvoir utiliser. Et on a l'intention aussi, ça va être dans les suites, mais on est à finaliser ce journal-là. Nos constats. Le premier constat qui est vraiment ressorti, c'est pour pouvoir répondre aux besoins et s'adapter aux réalités des femmes en situation d'itinérance, il faut avoir le temps de s'informer. C'est revenu à plusieurs reprises que les groupes étaient tellement débordés, notamment les groupes mixtes, qui n'avaient pas nécessairement le temps de se poser la question « qui vient pas dans ma ressource ?» Quand on est plein à 100, 110%, on prend toutes les personnes qui sont devant la porte. On se pose pas la question où sont les femmes ou pourquoi les femmes viennent pas dans ma ressource. Donc, du côté des organismes mixtes, en général, l'ADS+, était pas un concept qui était mobilisé, même en fait que on utilisait davantage ce qu'on appelle l'approche humaniste. Donc, en fait, pour eux, c'était vraiment, on prend chaque personne, elle arrive à la porte, je la prends comme elle est, je l'accompagne, je réponds à ses besoins, je vois avec elle qu'est-ce qu'elle souhaite faire, mais il y avait pas nécessairement de réflexion plus loin. Puis de notre côté, en fait, ce qu'on a vu, c'est que l'approche humaniste va tendre à gommer certaines oppressions. Notamment, en fait, parce que justement, on prend la personne où elle est, si on a juste des hommes dans notre ressource, on se pose pas de questions sur les absentes. Donc, dans les pistes de solutions, là, évidemment, là, j'aurais pu prendre plus de temps pour vous en donner, mais il y a questionner notre offre de service, prendre le temps de s'y arrêter, offrir des espaces. Des fois, si on peut pas offrir un espace qui est l'entièreté de la ressource, on peut offrir des moments ou des espaces qui sont en non-mixité. s'informer sur l'itinérance des femmes pour, à ce moment-là, répondre aux besoins. Un des besoins, évidemment, qui est le plus nommé, c'est la sécurité. Donc, tout ce qui touche rendre plus sécuritaires les lieux, ça a tendance à avoir un impact positif. Donc, limiter les coins, offrir de la surveillance aux toilettes, offrir des chambres solo, etc. Puis finalement, questionner directement les femmes. Pourquoi elles viennent pas ou pourquoi elles viennent, c'est vraiment pertinent. Puis encore une fois, ça ramène l'aspect de les personnes expertes de vécu sont celles qui sont les mieux placées pour pouvoir nous orienter dans nos décisions. La DS+ a bien des limites, mais elle permet, selon nous, vraiment d'entamer une réflexion sur l'impact différencié de nos services, nos politiques, etc. Par contre, cette reconnaissance-là, elle est limitée actuellement parce qu'on a une certaine conception de l'itinérance. Quand on pense à l'itinérance, on a souvent un visage d'homme en tête. Puis, notamment, ce qu'on a réalisé, nous, au RAPSIM, c'est qu'on utilisait beaucoup des phrases ou des formulations qui étaient, par exemple, les personnes en situation d'itinérance. Puis ça, c'est quelque chose qui, à l'occasion, est pertinent. Lorsqu'on parle d'enjeux généraux en itinérance, c'est important de parler des personnes en situation d'itinérance. Mais lorsqu'on parle, par exemple, d'accès à l'espace public, c'est important de le nommer, que l'accès n'est pas pareil pour les femmes et pour les hommes. C'est important de prendre le temps de nommer ces besoins-là pour pas que ça soit juste une liste d'épicerie, mais que ça soit significatif puis qu'on soit capable d'aller plus loin dans ces conversations-là. Puis évidemment, c'est un travail collectif de retravailler l'imaginaire. Ça passe aussi par dans les représentations qu'on se fait. J'ai envie de dire, tous les groupes travaillent très fort à faire des images. C'est important, les images qu'on dépose dans l'espace public. Continuons d'en déposer des nouvelles. De plus, comme je vous disais, il ne faut pas hésiter à nommer expressément les besoins des femmes et réalités lorsque ça les concerne disproportionnellement. Finalement, un élément qui est vraiment ressorti, c'est l'aspect que les ressources non mixtes se sentaient seules parfois dans ce combat-là. Alors qu'au final, à la fin de la journée, on a tous envie d'aider tout le monde. On a tous envie de permettre que tout le monde puisse répondre à ses besoins. Donc, l'inclusion puis la reconnaissance des besoins et réalités des femmes, tout le monde a un rôle à y jouer. Les groupes mixtes, les groupes aussi juste dédiés hommes. Et il faut reconnaître l'expertise des groupes femmes, mais il faut aussi que les groupes non mixtes s'approprient ces notions-là pour être capables de travailler à l'amélioration de leurs propres ressources pour accueillir davantage les femmes. Où nous en sommes maintenant? Nous sommes à la finalisation du journal de recherche. Il nous reste quelques sessions d'écriture. On est sincèrement vraiment dans les dans les dernières lignes. Et on a été invités aux États généraux de l'itinérance qui se tiendront du 27 au 29 novembre pour en parler. J'ai d'ailleurs 90 minutes cette fois-là, donc ça risque d'être plus facile pour moi là, d'en parler. Et puis, on veut aussi débuter une communauté de pratique. On a eu beaucoup de groupes qui nous ont demandé « Hey, c'était super cool les focus groups, mais qu'est-ce qu'on fait après? » Ce qu'on veut faire après, c'est s'asseoir avec vous, prendre le temps, voir comment on peut collectivement, ensemble, développer des outils. L'outil que vous avez fait pour moi est comme, je l'ajoute, je vois comment je pourrais le retravailler pour le traduire notamment, mais le mettre dans notre journal de recherche. Puis c'est le genre d'outil qu'on aimerait voir. On aimerait notamment faire un diagnostic interne qui serait spécifique aux ressources en itinérance. Donc, un espèce d'outil sur lequel les groupes pourraient, pas en mode checklist, mais en mode genre, hey, quelles sont mes zones d'ombre dans mes locaux? Comment je peux améliorer tout ça? Donc, c'est pas mal ça. Merci pour votre écoute. Mes coordonnées sont là. Nous sommes sur Facebook, Instagram et X. Et puis, je resterai pour la période de questions.
Folks, before you leave, just if you want to hear more about the toolkit, you can leave if you need to. But just come sign up if you want the toolkit at the end. Okay, bye.
I don't see my slide here.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. Oh.
Do you have it on there?
I have it in a stick.
Do you have any help, or because you can start talking if you want, I can do that.
Oh, okay, sure. Find it here. Let's see. I think I did it. Thank you.
Perfect. And then you can just let's close this one.
Okay, hold on, happens. I'll start presenting. So greetings, everyone. My name is Sumi Chang, as mentioned earlier, and I'm the executive director of Street Haven. Street Haven is an award-winning agency. We're actually a multi-service agency that provides multiple services across the housing continuum, but also in other areas, including health services. We actually, despite the fact that we are award-winning, have a very grassroots beginning. I'll make sure to speak into the mic, sorry. We have a very grassroots beginning. Our founder is actually an emergency room nurse. For those of you familiar with Toronto, who worked at St. Michael's Hospital. And she noticed that back then in the 60s that a lot of very vulnerable women were actually being underserviced by the hospital system and the broader welfare system, specifically sex workers. And so she decided to create a 24-hour drop-in center, a place that was safe for women to come to seek some supports, to seek some social networking, and a place that provided them services without judgment. Fast forward 3 years later, she created Canada's first women's shelter. And let me just show this slide. This is her on the corner. I've been told that she kind of looks like Jodie Foster. I don't know if that's true, but someone said that to me once. And she, and creating that first women's shelter, we then moved on, and 55 years later, we now provide a suite of services. We've now been operating almost 6 years. Next year will be our 60th anniversary. We operate several programs, including 2 shelter programs. One we call the Bay Shelter Program, and another we call the Hotel Shelter, which came about through COVID. We also provide several supportive housing units all across Toronto, primarily in the downtown east. And we also operate only one of 4 women's residential treatment programs in Toronto. There's only 84 beds in Toronto, and we operate only about 8 of those. So very under-resourced, and it's the longest stay program right now in Toronto. And in addition to those residential programs, we also operate outreach programs, including an addictions outreach team, a mental health and trauma counseling team, and also our mental health, and also something we call the Housing Stabilization Program. Essentially what it does is it's like a SWAT team that goes in to women's houses who are at risk of losing their housing and just helps stabilize them so that they prevent, so they're not evicted. We also offer training and supports and employment supports. So in our 59-year history, on an annual basis, we serve about 1,500 women. In the course of our entire history, we've probably serviced tens of thousands of women. And we really use a whole person approach to the work that we do that's focused obviously around the housing piece, but also ensuring social assistance and other supports that they need, really enhancing those life skills. And obviously mixing that with the healthcare supports that they need. At the end of the day, what we're really focused on is trying to create this pathway from homelessness and shelter through addictions treatment all the way through to affordable housing. And we really use a trauma-informed and gendered approach to how we provide housing. So these are just images of our addictions treatment program and some of our clients. And we operate our residential treatment in a very residential building. Despite the success of our residential treatment program, we actually noticed that we had quite a bit of a fundamental problem with our addictions treatment programming in that the majority of our clients were homeless. And for those who are homeless, as they enter into our treatment program, there are 2 issues at stake. One is that they're so focused on where they're going to be living after they complete the 90-day stay, and we are the longest stay. Often it interferes with their ability to concentrate on the programming. The other problem is that when and if they do complete their program, they're pretty much discharged back into very unsafe situations, either on the streets, in shelters, or back into unsafe partner situations, which makes the likelihood of their ability to practice those coping skills that we've given them through treatment program unlikely, and therefore a high risk of relapse. So we decided to create a transitional housing program on a pilot period. And that pilot project is really grounded in 2 key frameworks and models, if you will. One is the Housing First model, which all of you are familiar with. But essentially, we just recognize that for these women, in order for them to even concentrate on any other aspect of their life, they must have a safe and secure place to do so. And so we felt that providing them with this space and a temporary location and time to deal with the other issues, including continuing on the recovery journey, was very important for their success. The other key framework that we applied is integration, services integration between health and social services. I offer this definition. It's actually part of my doctoral work I did a few years ago, but it's based off of the WHO definition. Essentially, it just says healthcare organizations across the care continuum are working together with social services so that services are complementary and coordinated in a seamless and unified system where care continuity for the patient is achieved in order to secure the desired health outcomes using a holistic perspective. Before I jump into the actual program itself, I wanted to talk a little bit about the complexity of our clients. None of this will surprise you. You probably service clients that have similar profiles. But in essence, our clients do present with very complex, not only healthcare medical needs, but also social care needs. All of our clients who were entered into the program, and there were 13 during this demonstration project, who were living in deep poverty. They were on social assistance or had not yet even applied for social assistance. They had a history of homelessness, whether it's chronic homelessness or living in shelters or sadly in unsafe partner situations or on the streets. As well, because of that history, they had very, very, very minimal social networks or none at all, really lost contact with their family. Of the 13 clients that we serve, I just wanted to highlight that they were a very diverse group. And 8 of those clients were members of the BIPOC community, and several of those members were also part of the LGBTQ+ community as well. Several of them were survivors of domestic violence, as well as several of them were corrections clients. It is also important to note that all of them had mental health and accompanying trauma, and that I think that's not surprising in terms of their relationship to addictions. Unfortunately, none of them were attached to a primary care physician, nor to a psychiatrist. And psychiatry services in Toronto, I'm sure elsewhere, is extremely, extremely rare. Our wait lists, our wait times are up to 6 months, even a year, and even longer. So it's very challenging right now. So with regards to our program, it's actually a 24/7 program where we provide up to 3 to 6 months of stay, where we have 3 beds. We provide round-the-clock care, supportive care, and clients are given access given supports from a social determinants of health lens. The services are really focused on the client and their individual needs, and we really want to center the programming around each of the individual client's context and situation. However, our program can be bucketed under 3 big buckets. One is the basic needs of just healthy, nutritious meals and bed and board, those needs. And then we have the social services needs. And under those social services needs, they included the social care support, housing supports, which was very, very critical. We kind of immediately go in and provide clients with assistance around trying to find a home after they leave our transitional program, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's market rent, trying to help them access income supports and housing supports so that they can afford market rent if that's where they end up, or social housing, or even finding them other forms of residential treatment programs that they can then move on to. In addition to that, we also provided employment and training supports. With regards to training supports, it was also another vital component of that program. In fact, we made it a requirement. If they wanted to enter into the program, they had to complete certain types of training. There was life skills training, but one of the key trainings included something that all of you would have heard, Rent Smart. We took a variant of that, and we've actually made it a program of our own in which we teach clients how to become good tenants so that they can maintain their housing, but also teaching them what the rights are, their rights under the Ontario Residential Tenancy Act. So that's a very core mandatory program that they all have to complete. They also had, of course, access to ensuring that they could apply for social assistance. For certain clients, we also connected them with legal aid and other justice-related related resources and family reunification resources, depending on the client and their needs. On the healthcare side, we ensure that they continue to receive addictions support, treatment support, but on an outreach basis. They also were given mental health and trauma counseling supports if they expressed interest in that. And through community-based partnerships, we ensured that they had access to primary health care, psychiatrists, addictions medicine physicians, as well as hospital and community-based crisis resources. We wanted to make sure that they were very connected to their community. So this diagram really is just more just a diagram than anything. I don't think it really says anything too substantive. It just shows the layering of our services in terms of we kind of first start off with those basic needs. Then we layer on top of that the intensive case management. That is very, very vital for us because we ensure that the clients undergo any additional thorough assessments, as well as, which is also a critical component of the programming, all clients must undergo goal setting. If they do not want to participate in that, then that is a program that doesn't meet their needs. The goal setting, although they have to engage in that exercise, they can decide what those goals are. It's very specific to that individual. And then we engage in services coordination once we have a sense of the goals that they want to advance, but also based on the assessment of their needs. We ensure follow-up and connections to all the various community-based partners and also our internal Street Haven services. In essence, this person, this addictions counselor, acts as the most responsible person, ensuring that there's always connections and soft handoffs and seamless continuity of care. Lastly, and then the next ones are just layering on our own Street Haven services where we have access to our mental health programs, our socio-cultural recreational activities, which are actually really seamlessly integrated with this transitional housing program so that clients can continue on that kind of pathway towards health promotion and mental health improvement. And then, of course, the food services piece. The community-based services piece is vital. We want them to, once they're discharged, go back into the community and have connections. So we make sure that they're connected to various healthcare and social services partners, whether it's hospitals, primary healthcare, or mental health and crisis teams and other social assistance and legal aid and et cetera. Again, this is another diagram, but I thought it would be interesting to just kind of see that clinical pathway, that journey from a timeline perspective. The client will come in as first come in through referrals into our addictions program. And then once they're assessed and deemed where it's appropriate to move into our transitional housing program, which is more supportive care. There's an intake, there's an additional assessment, and then they're referred into various services, both health and social services. Once they complete their time with us, and they decide that time, but no more than 6 months, we then discharge them, and it's a soft handoff, right? We don't abruptly leave them stranded out in the streets, kind of thing. They'll either end up in our own shelters, or they'll end up in our supportive care housing units. Although it's very rare that we get a lot of turnover in our supportive care housing. Or they'll end up in the community where they'll have access to other supportive care housing or social housing or the rental market or even other treatment sites, and worst case scenario, a shelter. So I'm just going to share some client outcomes with you with regards to this. So we're happy to say that when it comes to recovery and continued sobriety for some of our clients, the majority of our clients actually continue to stay on the recovery journey. In fact, 10 of the 13 stayed on the recovery journey even after a year post-discharge, which is great results for us because this is a very high-risk group. 3 did unfortunately relapse within a year. In addition to that, kind of complementing that, is the fact that in the time that they stayed with us, we did not have to contact 911 services at all. So no 911 calls, not having to send them to hospitals, and being able to avoid some of those unnecessary emergency room visits, which I think is another benefit, not only for the clients, because that is a very traumatic event, but also for the system in general. The other aspects that were also really great for the client was that we were able to achieve a level of housing security for many of our clients. In fact, 9 of our 13 clients ended up in some place after the transitional house. So they either ended up in supportive care and social housing or the rental market or additional treatment residential programming. 3 did end up in a shelter. And unfortunately, 1 did end up pretty much on the streets homeless. It was her choice. She actually was given an opportunity to access supportive care, but she declined that. Other benefits included just this ongoing advancement towards increasing their sense of independence and ability to kind of live more independently and gain a sense of control over their aspects of their lives, and continue to deepen those social networks, because part of the treatment programming included participating in peer support counseling. And so that was an opportunity for them to continue those relationships they had built in their treatment programming, and just trying to further support their own mental health and well-being. So this, the last slide really is just talking about what we feel are the critical success factors for our post-treatment transitional project. First and foremost, the intensive case management was really critical as a piece of success. We do need that most responsible person who can act as kind of that linchpin, holding that client and connecting them to all of the various services, whether it was internally with Street Haven or externally with community partners. Related to that too was ensuring that the clients focus on goal setting. That was very vital. They had to have goals. They had to have this continued sense of momentum forward. And those goals were very unique and particular to the clients. We do not prescribe what they should be chasing after or what they view are important. Some felt it was family reunification. Others felt like they wanted to continue and complete their justice pathway. Others were about housing or employment or other key areas of concern for them. Another key critical success factor for us was really that focus on housing first. This further provides evidence and proof that a housing first model does work, even if it's for a short time, but it's anchored around that notion. Let's provide the client first with a safe place before we have them tackle every other aspect of their life. Related to all of this was the social determinants of health lens. We have to focus on all aspects of the individual. It's not just addictions and treatment recovery, and despite Ontario's own provincial public policies around that, it is more than just treatment. It's about all other aspects. I know I'm preaching to the converted. We all know this. And then lastly, just that trauma-informed piece. That is very vital for us. We understand that our clients have very violent histories in different ways, and that has contributed to their trauma, and that in turn has contributed to their own addictions and why they're seeking recovery. So thank you so much, and I just thought I'd end it with a client testimony. This is, her name is Adil. She's actually one of our clients, and she just wrote a really nice testimony to our addictions treatment program and our post-treatment program. But in essence, she just outlines kind of like how she felt very transformed by being a part of our program, and how she felt a greater sense of independence. And really for her, the most important thing was being reunited with her children and being able to kind of position herself as a mother again and not as an addict. So I thought she's one of our successes. We're really proud of her, and we wish her continued success. So thank you for your time.
So we have, I imagine the next session is pushed back as well. Does anybody know? Did they mention in the room? Because okay, so we have half an hour, friends. That's thrilling. Good job, everyone. 20 minutes on the nose, I think. Given that we have no moderator but us, any questions for any of us? The floor is yours. And I'd ask that you go to the microphone just to make sure that if we can translate the languages, please. Question. Also, if there's things that you folks are working on in relation to the stuff that we all spoke about, not just because we're up here doesn't mean we are the sole experts in the room, right? Everybody here is an expert in the work that you folks are doing as well. And I think given the fact that we have half an hour, let's brainstorm. How can we capitalize on all of our successes? Also, it's the end of a conference, so understandable.
And I'm also going to be super lazy and not speak in French. But my question, okay.
I understand English.
Okay,
no worries.
perfect. I am a federal public servant, so I should speak in French for you. But using GBA Plus, like ADS Plus, how was that received? I used to work in that kind of area, and a lot of people are like, ugh, right? Like, it just sounds like another bureaucratic lens that we're requiring that they apply. That's when it comes from someone like me. How was the reaction? Like, was there, oh, great, you've given me another tool, or yeah, how did it go?
For the, I'm gonna try in English because my answer. So for the mixed group, it was really a bureaucratic like things for them, but for the non-mixed, it was really like they were kind of disappointed because they felt they had like all the pressure on their shoulder to like demonstrate that they do like day to day ADS Plus, and they don't get recognized for this. And in the same time, like most of them said to us that like we don't have men in our service, so we cannot do ADS Plus. We offer service to women. So I don't know how to say this to you, that what I'm doing is resolve get the needs of the woman. So the attachment was kind of like more like conceptual for them, but we think in the same time that it's necessary to begin the conversation. And we think it's important to have it, but we think in the same time that the government and officials and everyone needs to like take a part of it too. Like with this la démarche, like they really, like it's really important that it's before, during, and after. And most of the time, like before, yeah, no problem. Like we're gonna reserve like 30% for like, but no, like not only before. Like we need, when we dépose un appel à projet, we need to think like how it's going to affect women and men differently, and think about in the appel à projet, not only, oh, there's like 3 women groups that like post a project, we're going to take them because there's only 3. Like, no, that's not ADS Plus. We need to think about when written the appel à projet.
Thank you for your question. Anybody?
I could say something, actually. So just as a follow-up about, I just was re-looking at the title for this session here, and I just wanted to say something, especially for those Ontarians. Our government is kind of advancing a set of public policies that I would personally say is somewhat regressive from a health and mental health and addictions perspective. They're closing several consumption programs, 6 in Toronto, so 4 residential addiction treatment program, I just said, 5 closures of consumption programs. And, when we discuss intersectionality of homelessness, addictions, and gender, it's like a recipe for disaster in terms of what's going to happen for these women. And we tried to highlight to the province, we've kind of sent letters, we've sent all sorts of things saying, okay, fine, you're focused on addiction treatment, and we're not going to, counter any of those discussions since we are addiction treatment provider. But, these programs, the likelihood of a lot of women relapsing are high. It's extremely high. As proud as we are of our program, the likelihood of relapse is high. And if there's not these resources and supports out in the community, especially because so many women also face housing insecurity, we need these additional programs. And I think this program in particular, this demonstration project we did, I think if we were to translate it up into social policy, really demonstrates that it's not simply like get off your ASS and get a job kind of thing, right? Which is what our premier has said. It's a complex. It's the intersectionality of several issues, and getting employment is simply not the answer. And that it's like creating this, again, the stigma and othering of this group that has addictions. And even when I tell, individuals out on the street, I'm saying, like, I just want to let you know, we provide treatment. These women are ready for treatment. But even then, the likelihood of relapse is extremely high for them. So you have to appreciate it's more than just treatment and more than just employment. It's everything else surrounding them. So to us, we really were keen on on understanding the results of our pilot project and just further hammering home and providing more evidence on that phenomenon of like the intersectionality of homelessness, addictions, and gender-based services. So that's just one. Sorry, it's more of my presentation, but I just felt it was important to say.
Amazing, thank you. Any questions in response or here's in response to that? Can you just do the mic? Sorry. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say thank you for that comment because I think it's I run a homeless shelter. I manage a homeless shelter here in Ottawa. And I think very often people don't realize that, like, even for those who do want to take an abstinence-based rule, we can send you to detox, but you're going to come right back. And that's the reality of the problem that we're facing right now. So, it's one thing to really be for and pro, and we also do have, thankfully, a safe, hasn't been terminated, safe consumption site. But, the chances of them going and coming back and relapsing is extremely high. So we do need those services as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Preach. Thoughts, questions? Also want to put out there, if you have questions about the scenario that we gave you or any of the resources on how to use them, you're welcome to ask around that. How to facilitate the conversation that is on the back. That's something that we can talk you through.
We also have a sign-up sheet up here if you would like to receive a copy of the toolkit when it's ready. You can come put your name down here and we'll email it to you. And if you happen to be 2S LGBTQI yourself and working in the shelter sector and living in Toronto, we would like to invite you to a sector network. We are trying to gather folks together to think collectively as people of this community who share some of the experiences that the residents that we serve may experience, trying to organise, brainstorm and gather around those concerns and provide solidarity to each other. So please do come to this if that sounds like if it's you.
And if it's not you, but you know someone who it is,
Also,
please take the poster.
Yeah, feel free to also just take a poster and put it up in your workspace if you're in Toronto and work in the shelter sector, because we do want to get this out to as many folks as possible.
That's a great invitation. Do you have any plans to expand beyond Toronto in terms of that, like networking and being able to support folks? I'm from Hamilton, we just don't have that. So we don't have a 519. We don't have that type of service. I'm with YWCA Hamilton, and we have the Spectrum program, which is like one of the only LGBTQIA plus youth-led organizations in the city. But we're really interested in expanding and better supporting folks within, the women's sector. So that's where then we tend to, bring in and are inclusive in that sector. But there's sometimes really those needs for unique services that are not, lumped together with women. Like there's different differences that are important. So, just curious if you have any plans to help support folks kind of outside Toronto as well, because we always look to you for what's going on.
We absolutely do. We actually are seeking some funding at the moment to expand. So Rebecca has developed and delivers some amazing free, if you are a shelter provider in Toronto, we are funded by the city to provide free 2S LGBTQIA plus training to the shelter sector. It's so great. So please do reach out to us if you are working in Toronto. We're also seeking funding to expand to the women's shelter sector province-wide.
Oh, amazing.
TBD on that one, but we hope to, yes. In terms of the staff networking, we actually did host some lovely queer and trans folk together staff at this conference, and we're going to be working with the CAEH to continue those spaces in the national conference. We're also, we're currently part of the Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness, and we'll be connecting with the other provincial ones as well, just to make ourselves known and seeing how we can support it. Absolutely. Like, I think that you may be aware or you may not be aware, but as well as being overrepresented in the homelessness population, 2S LGBTQI folks are also overrepresented in the staff of this sector than general population, and likely also social services more broadly. So we see a very strong need to gather those folks together to make sure that we can make the workplaces comfortable spaces for our communities, and in doing so, make the services comfortable spaces for people who might want to access them.
Thank you. I have another question too about Safe Haven. I'm just curious about the slides you had and, showing kind of the exit, where folks exit out of the program and, shelter, community. When you're talking about community, would that be like permanent housing, or are you saying community kind of back into situations that may not be ideal for just moving in a trajectory that they might be looking for?
No, we really want to focus on finding them more stable housing. So we try and get them the supports they need in order for them to be able to get into social housing, or supports enough to afford rental market as well. So it's not, we do not aim to send them back into unsafe, like partner situations especially. So that's those are the achievements that we have. That's part of the goal setting piece, is like where can we put you after you leave this program and not back into that place that brought you here in the first place. So yeah, it's very much about that housing security aspect.
Yeah, and how far after, like, post-program are you able to follow folks? I'm just curious about, because I think that's the piece that, like, it's always, we do, so much housing, we connect people out to other things, and then it is that looping back to the shelter, or like not being able to maintain that, and just measuring it's very difficult because folks are all over the place, and I'm just curious if you've been able to capture that.
So our addictions outreach team, it's been around for a while, and we actually continue to apply that addictions outreach services to that client base. So we follow them up to a year, sometimes even 2 years. The caseload of our addictions outreach team, I have to say, is a little bit too heavy. They're taking on almost 70 per staff, which is scary because they should be at 25. But my staff can't let them go, like personally, fundamentally can't let them go. And so we're able to actually track the success and the failures, unfortunately, if we call them failures, but where they relapse. And so we have a good sense of what happens to them. We even, for instance, which is one of the reasons why we actually are able to collect even death rates, sadly, we know that we have a rolling death rate over a 3-year period of 9 in 100. So you can see it's a still very, precarious life situation for these clients, despite being able to provide them with all these supports and landing them in kind of much more secure situations. We're still seeing death rates that are frankly exponentially higher than the national average. So, yeah. Maybe I can ask, why don't I ask, so just based on the comment that you both made about, even staff are members of the LGBTQ+, and we do actually, when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I never thought of that, but that's true. Even in our shelter, we do have, a significant enough number of staff who identify as, and I just wonder, especially again, if we're talking about intersectionality, with Toronto suddenly seeing the influx of refugees into the shelter world, and we know that, for the African refugees and claimants, the stigma around wanting to disclose that because they bring that with them from where they come from. Oftentimes the women will come to our site and they will not disclose that. If they wish to disclose it, then we will record it, but we won't force them to say, no, you're really this, right? And we just know over time through various, hints and things that they do. But I just wonder the intersectionality piece, how your staff are handling that, because it is, for us, it's such a dramatic change in Toronto. Like I've been telling people, we used to serve 30% refugees, and then we went up to 90% refugees, all of a sudden primarily from Africa, and now we're down slightly to 80%. And that was like a bit of a shock to our shelter. And I'm just curious about the intersectionality pieces, if you wanted to talk about that.
We of course have a very different context because we are super queer, and our team is also, I don't know what the percentage is, but we have a huge number of newcomers who work in our team. I was once myself one. I don't count as a newcomer anymore. So we have people who are coming to us because of the fact that we serve to us LGBTQI+ community, and because we have such a diverse staff team, we also have a multitude of languages, a multitude of cultural competencies, and we share those things with each other, right? We have a lot of conversations about how for example, Western Eurocentric expectations around like professionalism impact our comfort in the workspace. So we have those conversations. So we are like I would say we're a little bit of a unique environment where I don't know that our experience is necessarily that transposable, but kind of to the point you made about people's comfort with disclosure. I think that's why in your resource package, the piece about how you phrase questions and explain questions in intake is super important. So explaining to someone why you're asking the questions. This section is about demographics. You can answer whatever you want to. Completely optional. The reason I'm asking these questions is, one, because it's super interesting for us to understand who uses our services and how different people, how useful they are to different people so that we can improve them for different people. But also, there are different types of programs and services available. So if we have a better understanding of who you are, we can make better connections for you. So really explaining why. Because when someone's just like, hey, I just met you, are you gay? Like that's not comfortable. So first of all, being really explicit about why you are asking the question is very, very useful, and doing it to everybody, irrespective of how you perceive them, because we are we're queer here, we're everywhere, we have been forever, and how we present in different cultural contexts is very, very different. So you are not going to be able to tell if someone is queer, like full stop, right? So asking it uniformly to everybody, so everybody has that context and understanding and that comfort and awareness that if they do at some point decide to say, hey, I'm actually non-binary, that they'll be well received and that there will be resources that come from that, or like connections that come from that disclosure. And then secondly, in the resource section of this, like there's a section about community resources, offering those to people who are obviously you're not going to be able to offer every single resource that exists. That's a tome, and you'd have to have like 5 staff to review it every year or whatever. But like a selection, a smattering. Here are just a few local resources for you, and include some queer stuff in there. So that if someone, 3 weeks after they move in is looking through that and they're like, that looks interesting to me, they can be like, hey, I noticed that thing that you put in. Can you connect me? And then that's another way for someone to let you know without letting you know that they would benefit from those sorts of services and supports.
I just want to add, there are queer and trans refugees in your spaces. There are queer and trans people in your spaces. It is not, I'm not like, there's no caveat around that. Like, they are there. And if you don't know they're there, it's because they haven't told you yet, and because they maybe don't feel safe to do so. So if you don't actually currently engage with anyone who has identified to staff or to you that they are within community, that's something to consider, because we just received sort of an update from our last team meeting that we weren't at. We've just had to close our intake form for refugee claimants because there are 11,000 people in our backlog. 11,000 people, and we're going to close it by the end of the year. It'll probably be closer to 15,000 that who are queer and trans refugee claimants, right? That's even such a narrow, specific part, and those are just the people who have already come to us. That's not people who have not yet felt safe enough to say out loud who they are. Yeah. So they are in your spaces, and so that is why this is such an important conversation, and it has to be, it might feel like just another thing that you need to do, but they're there. They deserve that space, and there are more coming. We are our newcomer program is currently our largest served population as well, because I think that's happening everywhere across the country, and so the more that we can shift to do this work now, so that we are not encountering issues of people feeling unsafe, of lateral violence in the spaces, the more you can educate your current residents about how to be inclusive, so that they are breaking down their biases today, before they're encountering folks who are queer and trans, who have just arrived in this country. We know from our team that there are queer and trans refugees, newcomers, who return home to the countries where they will be killed for who they are, the reason that they came here, because they feel safer there than they do here in our spaces. So this is work that is like so pressing. Among all the work that we are already doing, that is so pressing. So I'm not taking away from any of that either. But if you would rather return to your country of origin, where if you're found out, you could be like state-sanctioned murder, that's a huge shift that needs to happen in our Canadian context around inclusion and welcoming spaces. So that's a heavy note, but just something that is, I think, worth saying. It is 11:36. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? Okay. Please do sign up before you leave for the toolkit. Thank you so much for your time.